When the emperor married his childhood sweetheart, I breathed my last, all alone in the cold palace. No one could detect a single breath from me. Little did they know, I am the sole successor of the breath-holding technique. The emperor wept bitterly before my tomb, while I had already fled to the northern frontier, feasting and drinking in a tavern. And while I was at it, feeling the abs of a young man from the western regions, life was supposed to go on happily like this, until an earthquake collapsed the imperial mausoleum one day. The emperor discovered my coffin was filled with rotten potatoes. The son of heaven was furious, vowing to dig 3 feet into the earth to find me. My name is Jiang Song, the world's only successor to the breath-holding technique. At the age of 4, I was still an orphan, fighting a stray dog on the street for half a sweet potato. After winning the fight, I met my master. My master was a chubby little old man. He said I had a remarkable constitution and asked if I was willing to become his disciple. I asked him, if I become your disciple, will I get roasted sweet potatoes to eat? Yes. Just like that, I joined my master's sect. There were 3 living beings in our sect, my master, me, and an old tortoise. It is said this old tortoise has lived for 10,000 years, and our method of training was to stare at the 10,000-year old tortoise and breathe slowly, imagining ourselves to be this tortoise. 100 years without breathing, 1,000 years without eating or drinking, 10,000 years without moving an inch. This is the tortoise breathing technique, and when mastered to the extreme, it becomes the breath-holding technique. At the age of 15, I completed my training. My skills were fully developed, even surpassing my master's. But I soon realized that completing my training didn't seem very useful. When others master their skills, they can open the gates of heaven with a single sword stroke. When we master our skills, we just look a lot like a tortoise. I felt I had been deceived by my master. I had spent 11 years training for nothing, but my master didn't give me a chance to question him. Through writing letters, he fell in love with an old pen pal from afar. He traveled thousands of miles to meet his twilight love. As for me, he figured that since my skills were perfected, I could already fend for myself. And so, at 15, I was once again wandering the streets. Fortunately, my master was well liked. The uncles and aunts from other sects in the martial arts world took turns feeding me. One day I'd learn sword techniques at the EQ sect for 2 days. The next I'd swing a broadsword at the broadsword sect for 3 days. Just drifting along like that. Drifting and drifting, I met Chu Qi'an. Chu Qi'an wasn't the emperor back then. He was the unfavored 6th prince. He was visiting a tavern in disguise when he ran into assassins sent by the crown prince. Just as the assassin was about to stab Chu Qi'an through the heart, I used a palm technique I learned at the MA sect. I got lucky. The assassin I hit coughed up a mouthful of blood and was subsequently subdued by the guards who rushed in. Chu Qi'an cupped his hands to me. Many thanks to the lady for saving my life. I casually grabbed a chicken leg to eat. Just thanking me with words? Don't you have some silver to spare? Chu Qi'an smiled. He reached out his hand to me. Would you like to come to the prince's mansion and follow me? I asked. If I follow you, will there be chicken legs to eat? Yes. Just like that, I followed Chu Qi'an into the prince's mansion. You all must have realized by now, I'm a person with no ambition, always jumping into a pit of fire just for a bite to eat. From the very first day I entered the mansion, I heard the servants whispering. She looks so much like the eldest daughter of the Song family, Song Shu. The eldest Miss Song has been married off to the Prince of Baian for 3 years now. His Highness still can't let her go. Isn't that right? On the shelf in the back of the study, there is still a portrait of the eldest Miss Song hanging there. They soon realized I had heard them and scattered in a hurry. What of it? Isn't this just the classic stand-in trope? Back when I was poor, I traveled the world with a storyteller and read plenty of scripts. I'm well versed in this trope. Besides, I didn't care. In Chu Qi'an's study, I saw that portrait of Song Shu. So what if I look like her? Under the heavens, beauties always resemble one another. Chu Qi'an sent over a green silk dress for me to wear, and I put it on immediately. He told me to learn music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and I learned them right away, though I didn't put much heart into it. It wasn't until that day, in the warm chamber, that Chu Qi'an had drunk quite a bit of wine. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me deeply. Chu Qi'an didn't know my trembling was from excitement. He thought I was afraid and carried me to the daybed. He whispered in my ear, "Don't be afraid. I will cherish you." Chu Qi'an was truly good to me. The palace bestowed some precious lychees, with only 1 plate for each prince. I devoured them all, only to realize I hadn't left a single one for Chu Qi'an. Yet Chu Qi'an just smiled and patted my head. I've noted it down. A song loves sweets. From then on, whenever there were delicious sweets or fruits, Chu Qi'an would always think of me first. As for other necessities, I never lacked for anything. There are no other women in my manor. The money is all for you to spend, and I really didn't stand on ceremony. I began spending lavishly to help my poor brothers. You see, people in the martial arts world may look impressive, but in reality they are dirt poor. And even if Chu Qi'an was the least favored of all the princes, he still possessed immense wealth. After Chu Qi'an gave the word, whenever my poor brothers from the martial arts world came to borrow money, I was always generous. Hero Zhang's mother fell gravely ill. No problem. I'll hire a famous doctor and hire 8 maids to wait on the old lady. The female disciples of Yuqing Palace couldn't afford winter clothes? No worries. I threw a thick stack of banknotes at the tailor shop on the spot and threw in a set of jewelry for every sister as well. I spent large sums, and Chu Qi'an never once questioned it. As long as a son can smile, it doesn't matter how much silver is spent. My master taught me, if you take someone's money, you must do the job well. Having spent so much of Chu Qi'an's money, I naturally had to contribute some value. When I learned the crown prince and the treacherous minister were plotting to kill Chu Qi'an, I hid in a lotus vat at the minister's house for a day and a night, and finally succeeded in assassinating him. Later, on the day of the palace coup, the crown prince led troops to surround the manor. Amidst a hail of arrows, I fought my way out while protecting Chu Qi'an. I took 3 arrows in my back, just to ensure Chu Qi'an remained unscathed. After all that toil and trouble, I finally got Chu Qi'an onto the throne. I thought I could at least live a peaceful and happy life now. But then Song Shu returned. After Song Shu returned to the palace, though she had no official title yet, everyone knew Chu Qi'an had loved her for over a decade. Now that he finally had her back, she was surely the only choice for Empress. Song Shu was clearly aware of this herself, so the first time she saw me, she didn't offer any courtesies at all. She just smiled and said, "You really do look like me." The servants around Qi'an say that every time he is with you, he insists on blowing out the candles by the bed. Do you know why? Because when the light is dim, you look even more like me. By the way, you like wearing green dresses too. Song Shu laughed nonchalantly. What a pity. A tiger painted to look like a dog. You don't wear them as well as I do. I see, so Miss Song likes green. Perfect. I have a gift for you. I clapped my hands. Yin Chao appeared on cue, presenting a green hat. That day, Song Shu's beautiful little face turned the color of liver. She went back and complained to Chu Qi'an. That night, Chu Qi'an came to see me. It was the first time I'd seen his expression look so grim. Did you make things difficult for Shu'er? Not at all. I was just being kind and giving her a gift, and I even picked her favorite color. Chu Qi'an was speechless with anger. From then on, she never came to my palace again. In the past, whenever Chu Qi'an got a precious treasure, he would send it to me first. But now, whether it was the lychees sent as tribute from Jiangnan or the parrots offered from the western regions, all sorts of rare treasures were sent to Song Shu one after another. There was even one time when Yin Chao went to the imperial kitchen to get my rock sugar bird's nest soup. Recently, blood bird's nest has been in short supply in the palace. The emperor said Miss Song's health is delicate, so it should be prioritized for her. Song Shu even snatched away my favorite dessert, but she still didn't seem satisfied. Once when we met in the imperial garden, she pointed at the jade pendant at my waist. The noble consort's temperament doesn't match this pendant. Why not give it to me? I refused, not because the pendant was expensive, but because it was the first gift Chu Qi'an ever gave me. Later, during the palace coup, I carried it with me through life and death with Chu Qi'an. In the midst of our argument, Chu Qi'an arrived. Noble consort, it was my overstepping. I had simply never seen such a beautiful pendant and looked at it for a moment longer. What is going on here? Your Majesty, I truly just saw this pendant and liked it so much in my heart that I couldn't help but keep staring at it. But the noble consort said I was coveting it, as if I were trying to force him to give it to me. Sigh, if Song Shu went into acting, she would surely be a star of the stage. Chu Qi'an's expression darkened. Noble consort, it is just a piece of jade. Give it to Shu'er. He didn't remember it was the first gift he gave me. Why should I, noble consort? You have been with me for so many years. You have everything good in this world. Shu'er is different. She has suffered so much in the north all these years. She isn't someone who loves gold and jade either. She usually has no interest in other things. Now that she has finally found something she likes so much, can't you just yield to her? Anyway, you have thousands of such pendants in your palace. I listened quietly as Chu Qi'an finished speaking and smiled. Hemp. I see. If she likes it, your Majesty can give it to her, but my things can only be disposed of by me. It is said that I frightened Song Shu that night. After she returned, she fell ill from worry. She was bedridden, and despite endless bowls of medicine, her condition never improved. Until later, when they discovered chronic poison in her medicine. The palace servant who was dragged out kowtowed trembling. It was noble consort Jiang who made us do it. And by then, Song Shu was already pregnant. The child was lost because of it. She stumbled into my palace, crying while holding an empty swaddling cloth. Your Highness, you can be jealous that I have the emperor's heart, but the child was innocent. After saying that, she fainted. Chu Qi'an arrived shortly after. He helped Song Shu up. Song Shu leaned into his arms, crying with a pale face, like a beautiful and fragile piece of porcelain, as if she would shatter at any moment. Chu Qi'an looked at me. He said softly, Jiang Song, you have no right to be jealous of Shu'er. You should know very well. Everything I've done for you over these years was all because of him. After saying this, Chu Qi'an held Song Shu and turned to leave. That night, After he left, I ate 3 plates of cherry pork, 2 racks of roasted lamb chops, and 5 fried squabs. Your Highness, please eat slowly. I can't. If I eat slowly, my tears will start to fall. You should eat too, or you might not get the chance later. The next day, the imperial decree arrived. Noble consort Jiang poisoned Song Shu. The verdict was set. Stripped of my rank as noble consort, cast into the cold palace. I guessed right. In the cold palace, I had plenty of time to reminisce about the past. I remembered what my master said. People are clear-headed when they are outside the game, but they become muddled once they enter it. I had been with Chu Qi'an for 7 years, thinking I was clear-headed, but in the end, I still entered the game. Love is the most formidable game in the world. My master was trapped by it, abandoning his home and business to run off with a beautiful widow. I was trapped by it too, unwittingly giving my heart to a heartless emperor. But my master also taught me, when a person makes a mistake, it is never too late to change. For the first time, I realized my master was truly great. He taught me the most righteous principles in the world, and passed on the most useful martial arts to me as well. That night, I practiced my breathing in silence, feeling my breath grow slower and slower, my body sinking as if into a flowing stream. In the distance, the sounds of Chu Qi'an and Song Shu's wedding echoed. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of firecrackers were set off, the festive spirit nearly overflowing into this cold palace. Yin Chao sat beside me. There wasn't enough charcoal in the cold palace, and she rubbed my frozen red hands with a pained expression. I wiped away her tears. Don't cry. We will be free very soon. By the way, do you know what kind of burial goods a noble consort is buried with? That day, although I was stripped of my rank, my title still remains. Your Highness, what nonsense are you talking about? Quick, spit it out. Oh, I was just asking. Pure curiosity, that is all. Well, there is plenty. Take the late emperor's noble consort Liu, for example. She had gold inlaid pearl earrings and coral bracelets. I calculated in my mind. Not bad. Forget about living comfortably for the rest of my life. I could squander it for 8 lifetimes and still not finish it. Taking advantage of the time Yin Chao went to the courtyard to get clothes, I did a few more things. By the time Yin Chao returned, everything was ready. She helped me prepare for bed. I said as if it were an afterthought, oh right. I left a letter under my pillow. If the emperor comes to see me, please give it to him for me. Yin Chao hesitated for a moment. She actually knew that Chu Qi'an and Song Shu had just been married, and was afraid he wouldn't come to see me for a long time. But she was afraid of upsetting me, so she comforted me saying, this servant will remember. Your Highness, rest assured. I closed my eyes. Darkness surrounded me. My breathing grew slower and slower. The flow of my blood also slowed down more and more. I felt my body grow cold bit by bit. The rhythm of my heart grew slower and slower until it finally stopped beating altogether. Chu Qi'an must be in the bridal chamber with Song Shu right now. This time, he finally doesn't have to deliberately blow out the candles. The next morning, everyone witnessed the love between the new emperor and empress. Chu Qi'an sat with Song Shu in the Fengyi Palace. This was Song Shu's first day as empress. According to the rules, all the imperial consorts should come to pay their respects to her. But Chu Qi'an had no other consorts. The only consort left was the noble consort Jiang Song, who had already been cast into the cold palace. Song Shu linked her arm with Chu Qi'an's and said gently, noble consort Jiang is still a noble consort. Why not let her come to pay her respects as well? She poisoned you and has already been cast into the cold palace. What reason do you have to see her? Sister Jiang was just confused for a moment. Besides, Shu'er has finally married you now. I want to receive everyone's blessings. As long as you're happy. He turned to the eunuch and said, go to noble consort Jiang. Song Shu sat in her chair, a faint smile playing on her lips. Only when Jiang Song actually arrived and witnessed how deeply in love she and Chu Qi'an were, would she truly consider herself the winner. But the eunuch was gone for a long time. Nearly an hour passed before the eunuch returned with a pale face. He knelt on the ground, trembling uncontrollably. It was a long time before he managed to choke out a few words. Noble consort Jiang has passed away. A shattering sound echoed through the great hall. It was the teacup in Chu Qi'an's hand hitting the floor. The hall remained silent for a long time. I finally waited for Chu Qi'an to come. His Majesty has arrived. No one was seen entering. Chu Qi'an stood at the doorway. If your Majesty wants to come in, then come in. What is there to be afraid of seeing? Heh. The consort loved you so much while she was alive. Even if she became a ghost, she wouldn't hurt you. His figure swayed once more. All the color drained from his face. Song Shu hurriedly reached out to steady him. Your Majesty. Chu Qi'an shook off Song Shu's hand. He walked in and came to my side. A song. In the past, whenever he called me that, I would always respond happily. Sigh, but this time, I couldn't respond to Chu Qi'an anymore. A song. You can't be dead. You were so healthy, so full of life. The imperial physician examined me nearby. Your Majesty, the noble consort likely died from old wounds flaring up. She had 3 sword wounds on her back. and took a palm strike to her left shoulder. That strike was very close to her heart. Chu Qi'an froze. He knew how those wounds were sustained. The sword wounds on her back were from shielding him during the coup. The left shoulder was from when she assassinated the treacherous prime minister and took a blow from his guard. Chu Qi'an had asked me then if it hurt. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Look, I'm eating well and sleeping soundly. I'm as fit as a fiddle. In truth, how could it not have hurt? It was just that I wasn't used to complaining, plagued by old injuries, and having accumulated deep sorrow into illness. Your humble servant dares to guess that noble consort Jiang died of heart failure. Chu Qi'an lowered his eyes to look at me. He reached out his hand as if wanting to touch my face. It was I who killed her. Yin Chao stood up, blocking him from me. For the sake of the emperor's health, your majesty should not touch her. Chu Qi'an's face turned even paler. He knew Yin Chao hated him, if even Yin Chao hated him this much, let alone a song before she left. Was she very resentful of me? The consort did not mention it. He took out a letter, his expression cold. This is what the consort left for your majesty. Your majesty may read it yourself. Chu Qi'an dismissed everyone. He sat alone in the cold palace, beside my corpse, and unfolded the letter. Love is like the snow on the heavenly mountains, bright as the moon among the clouds. Hearing you have a change of heart, I have come to make a clean break. I recite this poem to myself. It was long, however. Only these 4 lines were written on the first page, and that was it. Chu Qi'an turned to the second page. I'm sorry, I really forgot how the rest of it goes. I'll just say what I have to say. Chu Qi'an, I like you, and I know you don't like me, but that is okay. Thank you for being good to me all these years. I know I won't make it, so I leave this letter to say a few more words to you. There is a giant black rock east of the lake. I often sleep on it. I always feel so at peace when I lie there, so I hope you will have it buried with me, so I can keep sleeping on it. In the palace besides you, I don't really know anyone else. Only Yin Chao has stayed by my side. The only thing I'm worried about now is him. I hope you will give him some extra silver and then send him out of the palace. After all, you should know, this damn palace is really no place for a person to stay. Oh, and I'm also worried about you. From now on, there will be no one to fight for you or kill for you. In the days when I cannot protect you, you must protect yourself, be a good emperor, and don't make so many enemies. We won't meet again. Jiang Song. Chu Qi'an finished reading my letter. The room was very quiet. Only his breathing could be heard. Suddenly, hot tears dripped one by one onto my face. I suddenly realized Chu Qi'an was crying. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry. Why cry? He was the one who said it himself. He loved Song Shu, and he was only good to me because I resembled her. For someone he didn't love, would he be this heartbroken when they died? I don't know how much time passed. A young eunuch came in to report, Your Majesty, the Empress has had a sudden heart palpitation and has fainted. Chu Qi'an stood up. The tear tracks on his face had already dried. He looked cold and distant again as he usually did. Understood. I will go there at once. Look at that. Even if my death made Chu Qi'an a little sad, he would still go to be with Song Shu. Fortunately, I don't care anymore. My body was kept in the royal ancestral hall, awaiting burial on an auspicious day. Yin Chao kept vigil for me. She cried until she fainted several times. My heart ached for her. Several times I wanted to sit up in the coffin to comfort her, but I couldn't. Yin Chao has a hot temper and can't keep secrets. For the sake of our plan for the future, I had to let her suffer for now. Chu Qi'an never came to see me, but he honored my final wish, having the giant black rock from east of the lake brought here, so I could lie on it for my burial. On the day the coffin was sealed and buried, Chu Qi'an and Song Shu came together. Chu Qi'an had been acting very calm until a palace maid timidly presented something to Song Shu. Your Majesty Empress, this was fished out of the lotus pond. It seems to be something you wanted before. It was a jade pendant, one I had worn for many years, and then thrown into the lotus pond. Song Shu scolded in a low voice. What kind of unlucky thing is this? I don't want it. She wanted to toss the pendant aside, but Chu Qi'an suddenly said, bring it here. For some reason, the gold casing around the jade, the moment it was handed to Chu Qi'an, suddenly fell off. The pendant broke into several pieces. Chu Qi'an was stunned. Broken jade. Everyone knows jade can ward off disaster for its owner, but broken jade is an omen of misfortune. I have so many rare treasures in my palace. Why would you carry a piece of broken jade, Yin Chao? Yin Chao said with red eyes. Her Majesty told me. This pendant was what you gave her when you first met. Chu Qi'an froze. When she wore this pendant to protect you during your struggle for the throne, the crown prince's men fired an arrow. It was this pendant that blocked it, and it broke because of that. Her Majesty found a craftsman using gold to craft a casing to piece the jade back together. She said that by wearing this jade, she would take on all the misfortune, leaving all the good fortune to the emperor. She loved the emperor, so she was willing to shield him from disaster. The coffin lid was suddenly pried open. There was a commotion of voices, the sounds of eunuchs and maids trying to intervene, and the sound of Song Shu crying out. Chu Qi'an was shouting my name. He looked like he had gone mad, his eyes bloodshot, struggling to climb into the coffin. I am here. I have come to be with you. Quick, pull the emperor away. In the end, Chu Qi'an was forcibly dragged away by the palace servants. The coffin was sealed and lowered into the ground. After a long while, I gradually regained my breath. I opened my eyes and was greeted by piles of gold and jewelry inside the coffin, which nearly blinded me. I knew there would be many burial goods, but I didn't expect this many. I was so happy I almost lost my breath again right then and there. At this moment, I had finally recovered my breath. However, the coffin was already sealed with thick layers of earth, which even a master martial artist would find hard to open. But that didn't matter. I had brought help. Hey, old friend. I tapped on the giant black stone. A massive turtle claw appeared, then it slowly pushed the coffin lid open. That is right. He is the founder of our breath-holding sect, the 10,000-year-old turtle, who is the ancestor of my master's 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 master. Fresh air rushed in. I stretched my arms out toward the sky in joy. Ah, I'm finally free. 3 years later, everyone knew that a beautiful, wealthy woman had appeared at the tavern on the frontier. Handsome young men all vied for her favor. Obviously, that wealthy woman was me. At this moment, 8 handsome young men were lined up before me, trying to win my heart. The first one recited a poem on the spot, pouring out his feelings for me with great flair. The second one painted with ink. The third one played the zither, entrusting his heart to the flowing melody. Everyone's talent was truly exceptional, but I was just sleepy through it all. I clapped perfunctorily until the 8th one walked up. I propped up my drooping eyelids. "What talent do you have?" I asked drowsily. "Show me." "As you wish." He then flipped open his outer robe, revealing well-defined abdominal muscles. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. "Good. Very good." The other young men were annoyed. Who would have thought that while this wealthy woman has a fortune, her spiritual refinement hasn't kept pace? She only enjoys such vulgar tastes. I said to the 8th young man, "You shall accompany me for a drink today." He walked over and sat down right next to me. He was an extremely handsome youth from the western regions, with a tall and sturdy build so striking that one couldn't look away. But after all, I am a person who has seen the world, so I acted very nonchalant. I nonchalantly touched his Adam's apple, then touched his chest muscles, and finally his abs. Then I nonchalantly praised him. Truly top tier. I rewarded the youth from the western regions with a handful of gold pearls. The youth said, "I have long heard of your beauty, my lady. It is my honor to serve you wine. I cannot accept the money. You talk too much. Take it if I give it to you." The youth was overjoyed, clearly admiring me even more now. He poured me a drink. "Judging by your accent, you are not from around here. May I ask where you are from?" I said indifferently. "Me, just a dead person. Actually, I didn't introduce myself like that at first. I used to make up some kind of background, but I soon discovered that introducing myself this way is the coolest. That sense of melancholy and world weariness adds to my mysterious charm." Sure enough, after hearing this, the western youth widened his glass-colored eyes. "You must be a person with many stories, my lady." On the first floor of the restaurant, the storyteller slapped his gavel, telling the story of the current emperor and empress. It is said that the current emperor, Chu Qi'an, and Empress Song Shu shared a beautiful childhood sweetheart romance. However, Chu Qi'an was of low status in his youth and could not protect the one he loved. He watched helplessly as Song Shu was married off to the north. Later, Chu Qi'an survived many near-death experiences, successfully defeated his enemies, and finally brought Song Shu back to be crowned empress. The western youth asked me, "My lady, what is wrong?" I came back to my senses. "Nothing. That is already the best ending for this story." However, before I could finish my sigh, a fast horse appeared below the restaurant. The rider pulled on the reins and stumbled as they ran up. They shoved the western youth out of the room, and grabbing my collar cried out in despair, "There was an earthquake. The earthquake is here." The person was none other than Yin Chao. After she was released from the palace, I stopped her in a deserted alley, wanting to tell her I wasn't dead, but she screamed "ghost" and bolted for 2 miles. If my lightfoot skills hadn't been decent, I would have almost lost her. Upon realizing I was truly not dead, Yin Chao cried out, "You dead ghost," and hugged me tightly, almost strangling me to death. At this moment, I was confused. Wasn't the earthquake a month ago? Why are you running here now? A month ago, I woke up from my sleep, feeling a slight tremor, but it was nothing serious, and I quickly fell back asleep. Yin Chao's face turned pale. The epicenter was in the outskirts of the capital. I suddenly realized something and was immediately shocked. The outskirts of the capital are where the Imperial Mausoleum is. Are you saying? Yin Chao closed her eyes in despair. A landslide. The Imperial Mausoleum collapsed. Everyone else's tombs are fine. Only my coffin was flipped out. Even the lid of the coffin flew off. Everyone saw that there was only a pile of rotten potatoes in the coffin. There was too much gold and silver buried with me, and I couldn't possibly use it all by myself, so I wrote a letter to the brothers of the tomb raiding sect in the martial arts world, inviting them to raid the tomb. It is one thing for them to take the burial goods, but why did they throw potatoes in there? Even if there hadn't been an earthquake, Chu Qi'an would have found it strange later. If he saw potato sprouts growing on my grave, he would have been very puzzled. Yin Chao's face was deathly pale. The emperor is furious. He said that even to the ends of the earth, he would dig 3 feet deep to find you. We got the news too late. A month has passed. They might have already found their way here. I covered Yin Chao's mouth. Jinx, stop talking, let's run. However, it was already too late. The sound of hoofbeats came from below the restaurant. The officials have arrived. Everyone in the restaurant was terrified and fled in all directions. In the midst of countless carriages, a black stallion leaped out. On it was a familiar figure. He looked up, I looked down. Across a floor, we stared at each other from afar. He actually found this place himself. I finally saw Chu Qi'an again. He sat across from me. The cramped room held only the two of us. He wasn't wearing his imperial robes. He wore simple, dark-colored civilian clothes, and he had brought dozens of guards with him. Chu Qi'an ordered his guards to wait outside. So, I told Yin Qiao to leave as well. Yin Qiao was incredibly worried. I signaled to her with my eyes that I was fine. Once it was just Chu Qi'an and me in the room. I finally began to look him over. He had lost a great deal of weight. He didn't seem to have been living a happy life. But after all, he had been emperor for 3 years now. His imperial presence was even more imposing. Chu Qi'an's dark, deep eyes were fixed on me. He said coldly, "We meet again, Jiang Song." Back in the prince's manor, he called me Jiang Song in front of others. In private, he called me a Song. After Song Shu returned to the palace, he never mentioned my name again. He only addressed me with the cold, distant title of imperial concubine. Although he was calling my name with anger now, there was actually a hint of intimacy in his tone. I had rented this room at the inn long term. Chu Qi'an was technically my guest here, so I wanted to ease the tension. After such a long journey, you must be thirsty, sir. Someone pour some tea. The door opened. That handsome tall youth from the western regions walked in. He began to brew the tea. Chu Qi'an glanced at him, and his face darkened immediately. "Does this inn have no other maids? Why are you the one serving? Serving tea is a task for..." The youth from the western regions bowed hurriedly. "Reporting to you, sir, we do have maids, but the young lady usually lets me serve her. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken." As he spoke, Chu Qi'an's expression grew even worse. The youth saw that Chu Qi'an looked displeased, and he rushed to explain himself in a panic. "Actually, it is not just me. There are 7 other brothers. The 8 of us take turns. How should I put this?" I stole a glance at Chu Qi'an. I felt that if I were to light a fuse on his head, he would explode right there, just like a firecracker. I sighed and waved my hand, dismissing the youth. Chu Qi'an looked at me coldly. He said, "Why did you lie to me, sir? Have some tea to moisten your throat first. I am asking you, why did you lie to me?" I dropped the teapot onto the table. What else was I supposed to do? "Chu Qi'an, if I hadn't lied to you, would I have been able to get out? If I hadn't left the palace, how many more years would you have kept me locked in the cold palace? The food in the cold palace was rotten. The bedding was thin. Do you see the scars on my hands? Those are from the frostbite I got back then. Of course I had to lie to you. Of course I had to fake my death. Otherwise, I would have died in that cold palace long ago." Chu Qi'an's gaze fell upon my arm. A flash of heartache crossed his eyes, along with guilt and regret. When he spoke again, his tone had softened. "A Song, you have indeed suffered, but I would never have let you die." I said nothing. A long silence filled the room. After a long while, Chu Qi'an gently placed something on the table and pushed it toward me. It was that jade pendant. He had hired a craftsman to repair the casing. The jade pendant is lustrous, clearly kept on his person all this time. 3 years. I have kept it with me every day. I regret it so much. I regret not recognizing it back then. This was our token of love. I always have dreams. I dream of you returning from the Prime Minister's estate after the assassination, covered in wounds, lying on the bed, yet still smiling to comfort me, saying it didn't hurt at all, and on the road to seizing the throne, with 3 arrows in your back, you escorted me into the palace, securing the late emperor's decree. At the moment of success, you said to me, "How wonderful, Qi'an. From now on you are the emperor, and no one will ever dare to bully you again. Your Majesty, the jade is indeed beautiful, but once it is broken, it is broken. Even if you force it back together, it remains shattered." Chu Qi'an's body trembled slightly. He looked at me, his eyes filled with endless bitterness. He finally said those words, "A Song, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "There is nothing to be sorry about." Chu Qi'an spoke in a panic. "The one I love is you. Regarding what happened back then, I had no other choice. You don't understand the ways of the court." I interrupted him. "I do understand." Chu Qi'an was stunned. I smiled. "I know what you want to tell me. The Song family's proteges are everywhere in the court. You had just ascended the throne, and you needed the Song family's power to secure your position. So even though you knew clearly that I wasn't the one who poisoned her, but that Song Shu staged it herself, you still had to appease her and play along with her. So you had no choice but to banish me to the cold palace. You also want to say that by banishing me to the cold palace, the Song family would believe that I would no longer threaten Song Shu's position as empress, and thus they wouldn't harm me. You were actually protecting me, weren't you? Chu Qi'an's mouth hung slightly open, unable to say a word. He had gone to such lengths to find me, presumably just to tell me all this, never expecting that I had known all along. Yes, I actually understood everything. I just like to pretend I didn't. Just like how I was actually in great pain, but like to pretend I wasn't. I am not truly foolish. Living too clearly is meaningless in this life. It is best to just be happily ignorant. Your Majesty, I understand. You love me. But this love is no longer what I want. A song. Then tell me, what is it that you want? I will give it all to you. I will give you everything. I smiled. Are you serious? Naturally, I am. This is the promise of the Son of Heaven. Good. Then I want you to stop being the Son of Heaven. Chu Qi'an froze. I will find a fake death poison for you. From this moment on, you are not Chu Qi'an, but merely the husband of Jiang Song. We will drift down the river and live freely in the world, living as an ordinary couple from now on. If that happens, the past will be wiped clean. I will love you all over again. How about it? Chu Qi'an's face turned deathly pale. Do you see? Your Majesty, you cannot do it. You love me, but your love only brought me imprisonment, indifference, grievances, and torment. I don't blame you, but forgetting each other in the world is the best choice for us both. Chu Qi'an remained silent for a very, very long time. After a long while, he asked in a low voice, a song, one last question. Do you still love me? Your Majesty, please go back. The Empress is still waiting for you. There are many, many women in this world who love you. It is just that I am truly no longer one of them. Chu Qi'an left. Yin Xiao rushed in, flustered. Good heavens, you scared me to death. Deceiving the Emperor is a crime punishable by the execution of one's entire clan. I thought we were both done for. I smiled as I poured the wine. We won't be. What did you say to the Emperor to be able to send him away like that? And I noticed when the Emperor left, his eyes were red and he seemed very heavy-hearted. I took a sip of wine and said calmly, it is normal for him to be heavy-hearted. Someone who wants everything is destined to live an unhappy life. After that, Chu Qi'an never came to find me again. I continued to live a life of drunken dreams in the border town and even adopted a few orphans, teaching them how to practice breath-holding techniques. Yin Xiao set up businesses in the cities and had become a well-known proprietress in the western regions. When it came to the trade of tea, horses, and silk, there was nothing she didn't dabble in. Her sources of information were therefore very extensive. She often told me news from the capital. Once his power was firmly established, Chu Qi'an charged the Song family with dozens of crimes, including abuse of power and corruption, and had Song Shu cast into the cold palace. I heard he poisoned her food. The same kind he had once wrongly accused me of using on him. When I learned of this news, I was very calm. The past events in the palace seemed like things from a previous life. A few years later, the head eunuch from the palace traveled a great distance to this small western city. He said Chu Qi'an was critically ill and was holding on to his last breath to see me one last time. I hesitated for a long time and finally said to the eunuch, I think I'd better not go. The emperor has obtained everything he wanted in this life. Except for me, his only regret. By keeping this regret, he still has something to hold on to, which might help him pull through this illness. If I were to go back and see him, he might feel that all his wishes in this world have been fulfilled, and his will to live would fade away. So please tell the emperor to focus on his recovery, for we have a long road ahead. You are wise, my lady. This old servant is in awe. He left. Yin Xiao happened to come to see me and heard the end of the conversation. Why are you still trying to save that dog of an emperor? You should have just gone to see him and angered him to death. Then we could finally rest easy, one thing at a time. Chu Qi'an is a good emperor. Under his rule, the common people still have a good life. Besides, the emperor's death would mean a national mourning. With a national period of mourning, where would we even find wine to drink? Still, you shouldn't have told him we have a long future ahead. I smiled slightly. The long future ahead I spoke of was merely that he belongs to the deep, unreachable palace gates. While I belong to the wandering life of the world, the rest of our lives may be long, but we shall never meet again. Just then, the owner of the tavern knocked on the door. My lady, the new entertainers are here to show off their talents. Please bring them in. 16 young men lined up before me. What kind of talents do you all have? In perfect unison, they lifted their outer robes, revealing their abdominal muscles. I stood up and clapped enthusiastically, cheering loudly. Bravo.